tap your neighbor if they don't know that we want to get started. Thank you. So welcome. This is very exciting. And you know what? I've been living in Warwick for a really long time, and I've heard a lot of stories from people sitting in this audience. So I want you to consider the power of story sharing today. This is our third story share put on by our Ed Events team, and they do a lot of work to make this happen. I think they do a lot of convincing people to show up. I want to thank everyone who found they're brave to actually show up to tell their story today. Give them a hand. That's a big deal. I mean, everybody I spoke to tonight and said, "Oh, you're going to tell your story," and they say, "I think so," you know. So We the People Warwick, for many of you here who know, we're all grassroots. We do the hard groundwork to keep this organization going for the purpose of building community. And one of the things that we love about this work is that it is generating what we believe is possible in community, and that is connection. Also, because we're grassroots, we do a lot of we need to do fundraising. There's no one supporting this but ourselves. And we need, one of the big things that we do is we have events to bring people together. And one of the big challenges we face as an organization is insurance, like every organization. So if you can donate tonight, it would be greatly appreciated, because our $1,500 bill is going to be up in July, will be coming up in July. On your chairs, you have information about We the People, a brochure. You have information about a sit and chat that's coming up. I found my brave. My steering committee told me, you know, why don't you give a talk about We the People? And I'm like, me? So I'm going to be doing that on July 11th, and there's information on your chairs about that. I also wanted to say, there is a survey on your in the handouts that you have, and it's really the most important thing that we really pay attention to, and in order to improve and grow, we want your feedback. And so please take the time. We try to make it as simple and easy and as quick as possible, so please take a few seconds out before you go this evening or get involved with the chat to fill that out and hand it in. At the end, we're going to ask people who are inspired by the stories they hear tonight to also think about signing up to tell a story in the future. We won't be doing this again until October, so you have time to work on your story. And I'm getting really good at coaching, tell you honestly. Would you say? Anybody who got coached by me, would you say? Okay, good. And at the end, I just want to say out loud that Jeff has a little message, and I don't want to forget, because it gets really exciting at the end, and we want to make sure to bring him up to give a last spiel. So thank you. So this is how Story Share works. We're not professionals. We're doing it the best way we can think it through, and that it's fair. So we have a red light. Can you share the red light? Hold it up, Barb, so everyone can see it. It will be seen by everyone who's standing up here. It will go off at 5 minutes. But before your 5 minutes is up, we will give you a 1-minute warning. So even as I'm standing here and I'm like telling my story, my hand will go up. If I'm sitting there as a speaker, you will see my hand. I won't try to distract you, but that is your cue that you have 1 minute. I don't know what to call myself, but I'm strict about the timing. Not because I don't think your story is worth the space to share. It's just that I feel like I want everybody to feel that it's fair for everyone who's giving their story. So I try to make sure that we limit it to 5 minutes. Sometimes things show up in the story, I mean, not show up in the story, but something might happen we're not going to cut you short if somebody shows up and interferes with you telling your story. And I think that's it. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw names from a hat. If you want to tell your story first, you certainly have that privilege. Does anybody want to tell their story first? You do, Diane? I am impressed. So Diane will go first, but everyone else will be picked out of the hat by random. I do the picking, I won't look, but I call your name and then it's your turn. So let's give Diane a hand.
Hold on 1 second. Nervous energy here. Like this? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Whoa. Wow. Okay. Should I just start? Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Rowe. My family loves dogs. So when my son in middle school needed to do a religious ed project, volunteer work, we agreed that we would foster a Sinai puppy. And this involved having the puppy in our home for 18 months and training it with basic commands and socializing it with other Sinai puppies. And we were assigned this adorable German Shepherd named Breyer. For the next 18 months, we had him in our home. My son, on and off, trained him. But we enjoyed it, and he went back at 18 months, and we were pleasantly surprised that our dog passed. Only 50% of dogs pass the Sinai's rigorous test because they have to be very flexible and very smart. And Breyer passed and was assigned to a family in a woman in Western Pennsylvania. So when my daughter needed a volunteer project, we thought, we've got this covered, and we're going to foster another Sinai dog. So we got a puppy whose name was Parfait, an adorable yellow lab, and I think some of it was the difference in the dogs, and some of it was the difference in who was training them, but we thought this dog rocked. Within 2 days, my daughter had this dog sitting on command. Within a week, this dog was letting us know that she needed to go outside to pee and poop. Within a few months, she was opening the door to let herself out, which was a little problematic, and we had to start locking all the doors to the house because we didn't really know to run away. But what we noticed was as time went on and she was getting bigger, she was still afraid of steps. And as you can picture, any blind person needs to be able to go up the steps. So we worked with the Sinai on all sorts of things to get Parfait comfortable with steps. And by the time she was a year old and she still wasn't doing steps, I called the Sinai and said, if you're going to flunk this dog, flunk her now so we can make her a family pet and we don't have to follow all your rules and you don't have to waste money on her. They said, good idea, and they took her back to the Sinai and tested her. And 2 days later, they called me and they said, you're right, we've tried everything. This dog is traumatized by steps, and she's not going to pass. Do you want her back? And we're like, yes, we want her back. So a few days later, they dropped Parfait off at our house, and we open the door, and I have like my arms like this, like to get my puppy back, and Parfait runs right past me and up the steps. My husband looks at me and he's like, this dog knew a good thing and did not want to be a Sinai dog and work for a living. She wanted to be a family pet. So we enjoyed Parfait for years, and she was a delight to have around. And every year when we went away in the summer, we brought Parfait to her vacation, which was a pet camp in Middletown, which was an old horse farm. And Parfait loved it there. She'd run out of the car, never look back, and run straight to the pond. You know, she's a lab, and she loved to swim in their lake every day. Well, last year, she was 12 years old at this point, and they didn't want her back at pet camp. They were nervous about her. She was getting old. And so we needed to go to Vegas to finalize things for my husband's dad's estate. So we really needed to do something with her, and I had no idea what to do. And some very kind neighbors stepped up and said, we love dogs. We're going to come by your house a few times a day and feed and water her and let her out, and you should not worry. Go to Vegas. It's covered. So we went to Vegas. I didn't hear from my neighbors, and we came back, and I texted them from the airport, is everything okay? Because you don't want to walk into a surprise like an empty house. She was great. She'll be happy to see you. Come back and, give her a hug for us. So my husband and I walked back into the house, and Parfait seemed fine, no the worse for the wear. And I went upstairs to unload my luggage, and I noticed that the floor in the bathroom is soaking wet. So I called my neighbor, and I said, did something leak? What's going on here? She's like, oh, we didn't want to tell you. Parfait was starting the bath while you were gone. And she'd like to play in the water. And we would come by, and we would turn it off. And the next time we would come, when we were nervous, we came several times. We'd go upstairs, and she'd started again, and she's playing in the water. So they couldn't close the door because she knows how to open it. So they just kept on top of it until we came home. Once we were home, Parfait never started the bath again. And it was clear that she felt like if we were going to have vacation, she was too. She was not going to miss out. Clearly, we learned, if we didn't know it already, that this dog truly could have been a seeing eye dog and passed the test if only she had wanted to. Thank you.
This is Jeffrey's fault, you know that. So good evening. The year is 1967, and I've just finished 5th grade here in Warwick. I'm living with a family that took my mother in when she came to this country back in the 50s. And her good friend who came with her said, I'm going back to Scotland for good, and I'll take Michael so he can meet all of his aunts, uncles, grandparents. So we took a lovely trip on the Queen Mary. We made our way to Scotland. I met more aunts and uncles than you could ever imagine because it was a big family. And I met the youngest of that group, which was my Aunt Patricia. And it was a marvelous time. And I came back and I kept those memories. And now I fast forward to 1973. And my Aunt Patricia was a teacher in her school. And that school was going to Belgium for their Easter vacation. They invited me. So I thought, great. I went, had a great time. Came back, my mother flew over to meet me, and we spent a few days there to come back. And as we were leaving, she said to my Aunt Patricia, we had a great time, and my Aunt Patricia said, we loved having your mom. Now, men are pretty oblivious to things, right? But as we're going back on the plane, I said, why does she call you mom? And what she said was, after the war, I was a young 20-something, and I met a great guy, fell in love, and I got pregnant, but there was a problem. He was a Protestant, and I was a Catholic. And his family forbid him to marry her. So in the 40s, a young Catholic girl doesn't have too many options and can't raise a child as a single parent. So my grandmother raised her child as one of her own. And everybody in the family knew her as an aunt. And it was an amazing story to me because I had always been a single child, never had any siblings. I loved it, right? Spoiled. But suddenly, I learned that I was not a single child, that I had a sister. And while I lost an aunt, I gained a great sister. And it was a truly amazing experience for me. So that's the story.
Hello.
I speak fast. Oh, because of the time.
Hello.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Anbu, and I've been in Warwick for the past 5 years. So, anyways, this story starts in 2001, in July of 2001. It's my off day, and at that time, Singapore was my home. I get up in the morning to a phone call, and I get a phone call, and the person on the other line is my sister, who's very sick. She's calling from Lusaka, Zambia, and she's telling me, Anbu, I'm very sick. I've got malaria for the 4th time, and I have no money. And I need to get myself checked. So at that time, I used to work for Singapore Airlines. I have a free ticket in my hand to anywhere in the world that Singapore Airlines flies. And I just got my bonus, my 10-month bonus. And I have my and a 3 weeks holiday. So I had actually planned to go to Germany to visit a childhood friend of mine who lives there. So without thinking, I made an emotional decision to fly to Lusaka. I don't know how I was going to go, but I was going to get myself to Lusaka. So the next day, I booked my flight. I told the airlines, okay, I want a flight to Lusaka, but Singapore Airlines flies only to Johannesburg. So I took a flight to Johannesburg. I arrived on a Thursday night at 6 p.m. in Johannesburg, and I arrived, and then I realized it was in the middle of winter, because winter there starts in June to August. And it's in the middle of winter. It's not very cold. It's in the 60s. So I arrived, and I told myself, oh, wow, this is Johannesburg. But I blended in because everyone was brown and everybody looked like me. So I blended in, and everybody spoke English. I arrived. Then I went upstairs from arrival to departure to get myself from Johannesburg to Lusaka. Then I realized, they told me, the person at the airline told me there's no flights from Johannesburg to Lusaka, Zambia, because there was an international summit that was happening in Lusaka, where all the prime ministers and ministers were gathering in Lusaka for an international summit. So I was stuck. So it was Thursday evening. The next flight out is on Tuesday evening to Lusaka. And meanwhile, my sister needs me. So this is when my father's education of drilling my geography lessons into our brains kicked in. So I knew the geography of Africa continent. Then I just started talking to the teller, okay, get me to Zimbabwe. There's no flight out from Zimbabwe to Zambia. Tanzania, those were the neighboring countries that I could get to. Then I looked at the map. They had a map of the continent, and then I realized there's an airport in Victoria Falls. Victoria Falls is in the border of Zimbabwe and Zambia. So I said, what about Victoria Falls? She said, you're lucky because we do fly to Victoria Falls, and there are flights available. You can get yourself there. So I said, okay, book myself. I said, get me a seat there. So I purchased my ticket. The flight's on the next day, on Friday at noon. I have a lot. and at that time, I was excited. Okay, I got myself a flight to Victoria Falls. Then I realized I have no way to spend the night. I don't know where I'm going to spend the night. I can't spend the night because they are going to shut down the airport at midnight. So what I did, I panicked and I called my father. And my father, if he could tear down the time-space fabric, he would just come up and taken the belt at me because I was in another country. I didn't tell anyone that I was leaving. So he said, at this time, the only thing I can tell you is go to a corner, say your prayers, and do what comes to you. So I just did just that, and then I got up and I saw I needed to go and exchange my money. I had US dollars. I needed to change it to, I can't remember the currency of the South African. Shall I come back later? Let's see if you can come back later. Okay. Thank you. So then I walk across this, to the aisle, and then I went to the exchange place, and then I told this guy, okay, I need to give me exchange, $100 US. He said, he was watching me doing my prayers and then getting up and then coming towards him. And then he said, you look very worried. How can I help you? Is there anything that I can help you with? I said, yes, I need a place to spend tonight. He said, you are in luck. After I help you, I'm going on my break, and I'll help you to find a place to stay. So I walked across, he helped me, and then he came out, and he called, got me a B&B right close by the airport. He waited until the couple who owned the B&B come and pick me up, and then I spent the night at the B&B, and the next morning I had breakfast, and the couple dropped me off at the airport. And then I took a flight to Victoria Falls, and I realized it's just a hut. There's no airport. You land on the tarmac, you get down, and then you go and pick up your bags from the airport, from the aircraft itself. And then I realized, and I'm going to cry again. I saw the sight of Victoria Falls. I have traveled the world, but the sight of Victoria Falls was so beautiful. I never dreamed that I would see Victoria Falls in real life, because it was one of the wonders of the world. And I had this luggage, I had this bag, suitcase, and I went to the falls to see, and I have no clue how I'm going to get myself to Lusaka at this point. So when I was in Lusaka, when I was at the falls, there was a bunch of college students that have come to see the falls. So this group of boys came to me and said, how can I help you? How do you like the falls? I said, it's beautiful. And I told them, I need to get to Lusaka. How can I get to Lusaka? And there's nothing there. It's jungle. It's desert almost. There's nothing there. I had to cross the border. They said, okay, one boy said, I will give me $10 US, and I will take you to the nearest town. It's called the town of Livingston. I said, that's fine. $10 is a lot for them, but I said, fine, $10, take me there. So he took me, it's a 45-minute drive, and on that drive, I saw giraffes, I saw zebras on the roadside. It was such a beautiful moment. And then he dropped me off at this hotel, and I walked into this hotel, and the name of the hotel is Patel Hotel. And I think to myself, oh my God, they're everywhere. And the person at the concierge, I told him, help me, I need to get to Lusaka. He said, okay, I'm going to get you a bus ticket to Lusaka. We went across the street. He got me a bus ticket to get to Lusaka. I went back. I spent the night with these beautiful ladies who had braiding shop. I spent the night with them. It was wonderful. The next morning, I took a 5-hour bus ride to Lusaka. And I get to Lusaka, and after 5 hours, I finally get to see my sister. The moral of the story, don't piss your father across when you're in another continent.
Now, I'm demonstrating something I myself am not good at. When you're here at the mic, Jeff just told me that it's still hard for people to hear if you're not directly talking into the mic, because when a lot of people want to touch base with their audience, and as they turn, their voice drops. So if you can, even if you would like to hold the mic, it would be better than. All right? Thank you. And don't tell anybody about what happened to Ambu, okay? Do you know what I mean? That I gave you more time. Okay. Oh, I'm not supposed to look. Okay. Peter, you knew you were going to be called.
Thank you, Beverly. It's the late 1980s, in the middle of a recession, and I just lost my job. My wife is an attorney, so we switched roles. I became Mr. Mom, taking care of 3 kids, middle school and preschool. And things worked out very well until she decided one day that she didn't want to be married. So she told me that she wanted a divorce. And she started waking me up early in the morning with her legal pad, going over the details of the property settlement and the custody arrangements. She also wanted custody of the dog. Now, I did my best to preserve my parental rights in spite of the fact that she did her best to limit them. So when we finally got into court, the judge decided that we would have joint legal custody. And so the kids would live with their mom, but I would be able to have visitation with them on a weekly basis and overnights. But she didn't like that very much, and she did everything she could to keep that from happening. So visitation started with weekly, and then it devolved into infrequent contact, and then she moved out of state, and it became very difficult for me to maintain contact with the kids. By now, their ages were 11, 8, and 6. A boy was the oldest, and 2 girls. We had to go see a new judge, and he decided that a psychiatrist would have to interview the family and that he would determine what the best custody arrangement would be. So the psychiatrist took his time, and several months went by until he finally reached a conclusion, and he said that my estranged wife was suffering from severe personality disorder with narcissistic, paranoid, and borderline traits. So during one of the Christmas periods, I had packed up packages and wrapped them up and dropped them off at the kids' home, only to learn that a few days later, their mom mailed the package back to me with a little note said that Christmas is over. So I didn't know what to do. One of the court-ordered psychologists warned me that because of the fact that I was dealing with a person with severe personality disorder, not to expect my kids to reach out to me until she had died. So I said to myself, this is absolutely crazy. What am I going to do? But I had to get on with my life. So in 1999, I remarried. We had 3 more kids to fill the hole that was still in my heart. Sorry. We had a girl and 2 boys this time. The girl's the oldest. So time went by. They went to school. They're nearly grown up now. They're almost out of school. And last April, I got a strange Facebook message from my adult son, Andrew, who's now probably in his 40s, who said that his mom had recently died and that it would be a shame if he didn't get to meet his father, and that he wanted to meet with me. So I was flabbergasted. I said, I didn't know what to do first. So I learned that he was living in Philadelphia, and one of his sisters, his younger one, was also living in Philadelphia. His other sister had moved out to California. And so back in last August, we decided to meet. So I drove down to Philadelphia with pictures from their childhood and a 15-page report from the psychiatrist that reminded them that their mom had some serious psychological problems that really affected their behavior. It was a 20-minute walk from the hotel to the restaurant. I didn't know if they would recognize me. I didn't know if I would recognize them. I got lost on the way. I had to stop and ask for directions. But after a tearful reunion, they had many, many questions. And ever since that time, I hear from them on almost a weekly basis about their lives and their activities. And next week, I'll be taking my youngest daughter, Vivian, to meet her older half-sister for the first time. So in an extended display of unintended consequences, I just hope this experience enriches our lives. Thank you.
Good. Yeah. Can you hear me? Good. The year is 1993, and I'm leading the second of what turned out to be 25 field programs with Ramapo College students through the West. And about 3 weeks into the program, we had arranged that my wife and two children, who were at the time about 16 and 12, would meet us around the north rim of the Grand Canyon. The program involved mostly camping, although we were seeing interesting, wonderful things every day. There were wonderful programs. Anyway, there were no cell phones yet, so the arrangements were made in advance, and we were at the north rim, and she didn't arrive. So we waited an extra day to figure out what might have gone wrong, and it turned out that she did arrive about 24 hours later. And she said that she had picked up an older Navajo hitchhiker in Arizona. And the man was named Tom Bedoni. And he wanted a ride home. And so she gave him a ride home. But his home was 50 miles beyond the last bits of pavement, deep in the Navajo reservation, which is a very, very large and remote reservation. So she took him home, which was a compound with a number of other people that were family members that were living there. And that ended up, it was getting dark. It was getting dark already, so they pitched their tents and spent the night. And the next day, Tom Bedoni invited the students to come back down and spend some time. They were getting ready for a wedding on the family compound there, and they could use some help preparing for this wedding, which is about a week away. And they'd love the students to come and interact. So Anne arrived in the north rim of the Grand Canyon, and we had a discussion around the campfire and made a decision. About half the people decided they did want to go back to the big mountain, and the other half wanted to stay with the route that they were planned on, and so we split up, and half did one thing and the other half went back to Big Mountain. We went back, but the roads were not paved and they were very hard to find, and so we got lost. And by the time we arrived, it was already getting dark. So we pitched our tents and prepared for the morning. And during the night, I realized that I hadn't brought food. And with a half a dozen people with us, it was bad manners to not bring at least a load of food with us. So I decided to go back down real early in the morning to town, Second Mesa, and get some food and bring it back in time for breakfast. So that's what we did. We headed down to Second Mesa at about 4:30 in the morning. And it turned out that we got a flat tire on the way in sandy ground. Although I'm not good at changing tires, somehow I managed to rise to the occasion and get the tire changed. We got down there and brought the tire over, did the shopping, and the person who ran the tire place was at a funeral, and his assistant didn't really know how to do it, so the tire was stuck on the machine. So we ended up having to hang out for lunch down in Second Mesa, and by the time it got fixed and we got on our way back, it was already mid-afternoon. So we got back to the big mountain campground late in the afternoon, and the students had been put to work getting ready for the wedding. And that meant basically some of them were chopping wood and got some blisters on their hands. My daughter was and another Japanese student, they were put down to cut up lambs, basically chop up lambs for meals. And my son was given some practice using a rifle, which he wanted to do, and so someone taught him that. And they did this work. And after doing the work, it was decided that since it had been such a successful day, that they would do a sweat lodge. A sweat lodge is basically a traditional system in which people do 4 rounds of sweating and cooling off in between. And it was very traditional sweat lodge. It was wonderful. Students loved it. There were prayers and songs. People were not naked. We wore towels and stuff in there. And they were wonderful experiences. The sweats were great. Students loved it. We had a wonderful set of interactions. At the end of it, we stayed for an extra day and then headed back to Zion National Park, where we met the first group, and all sat around the campfire and talked about what happened and discussed the stories that we had to tell. And they were very, very delightful stories. And we did remain friends with Tom Bedoni for quite a few years, sent him salmon in the winters and things like that. So that's the story. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Does anybody want the fan off? Because I think it kind of interferes with the sound. Bob.
Hi, thank you. Okay. So my parents had 5 kids. Did I mention they were Irish? And one of the results of that was that I had a brother, Joe, who was 14 years older than I was. And so when I was 5 years old, Joe moved in with the woman who was going to be his future first wife. But we saw them pretty regularly after that, in the years that followed, until I was a teenager when that marriage broke up. And after that, we saw him less and less over time. And when I was in my 30s, he and his third wife, Becky, AKA the good one, moved down south. And in the years after that, it really was pretty unusual. It's pretty much just an occasional email, Happy Easter, that kind of thing. And so there really wasn't much contact. Now fast forward 20 plus years, I'm now in my 50s, and I get word, he sends an email to me and my siblings to let us know that he's been diagnosed with prostate cancer. So in the years that followed after that, about 5 years or so, we heard occasional updates about his treatment, how he was doing, and so forth. But then in late 2019, we get an email from him that says his doctors have decided to terminate his treatment. So we know what that means. And so my sister Joni and I, in January of 2020, started talking about flying out to Arizona to see him for one last time before he died. We all know what happened in 2020. So in COVID hit, and that was the end of that. So in February of 2020, I suggested instead that he and Becky and I and my wife Deb do a Zoom together. And so on a Thursday evening at 5 p.m., we sat down on Zoom and proceeded to spend an hour and a half with each other. And we talked, and we laughed, and we cried. And it was a really wonderful experience. And as we were wrapping up and saying goodbye to each other, my incredibly generous wife said, "Why don't we do this every week?" I have to admit, my response was, that's verbatim. So, but they responded to it immediately. They said, "Oh, absolutely, let's do this." And so for the next, I'm going to say 4 or 5 months, every Thursday night at 5 p.m., we were on Zoom for an hour to an hour and a half, mainly hearing about stories of his life. And I have to say, he was an incredibly interesting guy. He sang for Queen Elizabeth when he was a teenager. He performed in Broadway musicals in the 1960s. I'm betting most of you remember that once upon a time, Radio City Music Hall would show movies, and between the movies, they'd have a stage show with the Rockettes and singers and dancers. Yeah, you're all of that age. He was the MC for those shows in the 1970s. When they shut those down, he became a cruise director and sailed the world. And he would tell us these stories. And we would also talk about the struggles we had growing up in our family and the reasons why he ultimately decided to disappear along the way. And we became very close with each other during that time. And this went on for a bunch of months. And eventually we got the email that we had expected from Becky, which is that he had died. And that's it's about 2.5 years now since he died. And we're still in touch with Becky. In fact, we were on Zoom with her last night. And she's really been, this was the love of her life. She's dealt with the grief, but she's really struggling and has really been improving and doing better. But shortly after he died, we did a Zoom with her. And she told me 2 things that have always been important to me. The first was that as in those last few months, as his life was becoming smaller and he was becoming more detached, all week long he would wait for those Thursday evening calls. When for a little while he, sorry, it's an Irish thing. I get all choked up in these things. That he would wait for these all week long, and he would become his old, bright, charming self again for an hour to an hour and a half. And he was his old Joe. The other thing she told me was that shortly before he died, when he knew that he was almost done, he asked her that after he died, that that she send me this watch, which is a Raymond Weil watch that had been given to him many years earlier. And it was a matching pair. Becky also had one, and so she sent one to my wife Deb as well. And so we have these watches, and so I wear it tonight in his honor. But it was a great gift. I value it greatly, but the greater gift he gave me was the reminder that it's never too late to build a bridge. Thank you.
Don't have to clap, I haven't said anything yet. Hello, my name is Alan Held. I'd like to start by first thanking my wife for once again enduring my sense of vanity and coming here to support me. So, the story I have to tell you today is a story of adventure, onions, and Excel spreadsheets, and I'll explain that in a little bit. I grew up here in the town of Warwick. Actually, I grew up in the hamlet of Wisner, which is about 2 miles north of the village of Warwick. And my bedroom overlooked the way beyond a creek. I mean, I woke up every morning, you look outside, and there's the creek. And I spent a lot of my boyhood, a lot of my summers, like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, very idyllic, very, very nice. And I would sit on the bridge abutments and look out and, you know, read a book, do school projects, whatever it is, just in the background of just a beautiful place to grow up. And like any boy, I always had daydreams and think of things and question things and wonder why things are. And I don't know if anybody's done it before, but you look at a river, where does it go? How does it get there? Well, in 2014, I was 18 years old, and I called my buddy Jared, and I was like, hey, you want to go canoe to the Hudson River? And he said, sure, let's do it. He just finished his first year of the Air Force Academy. I had gone to Cornell, and we had come home, so we were still, you know, our stories were still relevant. We still somewhat knew each other, so it was good in that aspect. And I had a canoe that I bought from my neighbor for $50, plastic canoe, and my mom said we were crazy, but I mapped it out. We set off that morning with all of the supplies, and we went. And I had canoed the river a couple times before. I'd been down into the village. I'd gone all the way down there. I'd made it as far as the high school. We had wrecked the canoe by Sanfordville once, which wasn't very good, so we learned from that lesson. So we set off early in the morning. Most people don't know, but the creek has got a lot of obstructions. A lot of times the trees will fall over the river, so we had a process. Jared sat in the front. He would get out, pull the canoe halfway across. I'd get out, also step on the tree. Then we push off the canoe. We'd both get in, and we'd go. So we did that for several miles. We meandered all the way down through Warwick, through the village, down through Sanfordville. We had to portage around the dam, which we both got out. We walked around the dam. We sat back in. We kept going through Baird's Farm. We crossed into New Jersey. We made it as far as the Pochuck Creek, which is where the way beyond lets out into. And then it turned north. We went underneath the Appalachian Trail. And then in the middle of Pine Island, you would have never thought, here were these rapids. And at the first rock, we went left. At the right, at the next rock, we went right. And the third rock was right in front of us. We had no reaction time. Right into it. And it left a nice little dent right in the center of the canoe, which for the rest of the way, it gurgled and, you know, no longer was it hydrodynamic. So we made it as far as, we made it past Pine Island where the Pochuck leads into the Wallkill, which is not the Wallkill River because kill in Dutch means river, so the Wallkill is the Wall River. So we made it to the Wallkill, which in the early part of the 19th century had actually been dredged. That's how the drowned lands became suitable for farming. So for a whole 5-mile long stretch, it was just a straight canal. And some farmer had dumped an entire dumpster full of onions, and they smelled. And the entire way, for miles and miles, all we could smell was rotting onions. And for 50 miles, there was onions and onions and onions. And we went north. We camped out along the side of the banks the first day. The next day we went through Middletown and Montgomery and Wallkill and Walden. There were dams in Montgomery. We had to throw a rope around a tree, pull the canoe up over the tree where it was dangling, and then swing it over, haul it down. Through the town of Walden, because there's 2 dams that are rather sizable and the cliffs are steep. We had to get out and walk this 200-pound canoe through the streets of Walden, which I'm sure was a very interesting sight. Past Wallkill, the river was only a couple inches deep, so we were just out pushing the canoe at that point. And along the way were these little green specks of the bottom of my canoe the entire way, so we called it Old Iron Bottom. Finally, we made it to the Rondout, and then from the Rondout, we could taste the sweet, salty, briny smell of the Hudson River. And we finally made it to the Hudson, and it was 83 miles, 3 days. And before we had gone, I put together the spreadsheet to try to guesstimate how long it would take us to get there. And I calculated certain variables like, you know, how many blockages per mile and so on and so forth. And I ended up being, and I simulated it like 500 times, and I ended up being within an hour of how long it actually took us, which was pretty neat. And I like to use that in job interviews all the time. So I looked for a moral of this story. I don't know if it has a moral other than, you know, that was really the close of my childhood and the choice. The last time that anything seemed possible, that I could just go out and do something. So, you know, it's important to just fulfill those daydreams, whatever they are, and while you still can. And I'm glad I did it, and I have a new appreciation for the waterways of the Hudson Valley. So I thank you. I also made a shirt because it felt like going to the moon. I'm sorry. Jared was a groomsman at my wedding, so I made this, or my wife helped me make this for him. It felt like we were going to the moon, so we made like a NASA mission patch with old Iron Bottom on there, and then on the back we had a little map of where we went and everything like that. So, I thank you.
I've been sitting so long I can't move my knees. Okay, I guess this is what I should do, right? Am I okay? Sound on? Okay. So it is 2011, and Hurricane Irene is wreaking havoc and heading not along the coast anymore, but up the middle and going towards the Catskills, where my two brothers and I own a ski house. It's in a little hamlet called Hensonville, which is between Hunter Mountain and Windham Mountain. Our property is bordered on three sides by the Batavia Kill, which is basically a sleepy little creek. But had been raining for most of August before the hurricane arrived. And when it came, we got a phone call telling us that the water was surrounding our house. Not only surrounding our house, but it seems that the lake that is about 2 miles uphill from our house, the dam broke, and that water is now gushing down. And at the same time, the water main in the village broke and is now coming the other side, heading towards our house. The hurricane had wreaked such havoc that the New York Thruway was closed, and so we couldn't get up there. Finally, we hear that the roads are passable, and one of my brothers and I, we head up. And we come with shovels and rubber boots, and we don't know what to expect. As we pull into the driveway, the first thing we notice is there's no garage. It is not destroyed. It is not broken. It's just not there. And with everything else. I eventually hear from a neighbor that it went so gracefully, it just picked itself up and floated away. Another friend said to me, "Did you find it?" I said, "Hell no, I don't want to find it. It's on someone's lawn in 1,000 pieces, and they're going to think I should take it away. So I don't ever want to see it." But there my brother and I are, noticing that there is no garage. We figure we're in big trouble. We get to the house, we open the back door into the kitchen, and it's unbelievable what water damage can do. A full-sized refrigerator is completely tossed upside down and on top of the stove. The toilet has been lifted from its place and is now in the dining room, stuck in 12 inches of mud. We can see that the water level from the stains that are left was 4 feet, and we can also see that every place is 12 inches of mud. So the way we're going to start is there's a broken chair about a foot or two in front of us. We're going to move that chair out. I take the first step, I pick up the chair, then try and remove your foot. It doesn't come out. It's been sucked into the mud. So you have to put the chair down, stand there and haul your leg up so that you can. So the decision is, we can only go inch by inch. We can shovel out inch by inch, and we start. We're doing this for about 2 days. It's clearly hard labor and very tough and very slow. When 4 people, whom I have never seen before in my life, and I have never seen since, show up with their boots and 4 shovels and ask us what can we do, and we put them in a corner, and for 8 hours they shoveled. A few days later, a truck comes down the street, flatbed, with college students, calling out hot dogs, hamburgers. They set up a barbecue, and they had cold drinks, and they were feeding everybody because all the stores, all the restaurants, everything is flooded. There's no food. And then the third thing was a man came after we had done pretty much everything from New York City. He just came up with commercial fans to put in the houses so we could dry them out and not turn into mud. The last person was a friend who had been on vacation, and she says to me, I'm sorry I wasn't here. I would be so ashamed not to help you. I'm obligated. I said, why be obligated? She said, I don't want that to be shame that I did not help. And so what I want to say to you is if you ever have a tragedy, I will be there because I will be so ashamed not to be.
These are exceptional stories. Unbelievable. So, Leslie.
I wanted to make sure I didn't do a Joe Biden and trip on the wire. Okay. Hi, my name is Leslie, and I wanted to start off my story by taking you back to 2007 and just give you a little glimpse into what my life was like at that point. I live on a horse farm here in Warwick, and I was boarding horses. And I was recently divorced, and I was raising 3 children, Sarah, Zachary, and Sam. So life was a little bit difficult, and having gone through a difficult year, 2008, guess what happened? But we had this major financial crisis. And one of the first industries to really get affected by it was the horse business. I had people abandoning their horses, which was basically not paying me for boarding them and leaving them at my farm. All the horseback riding lessons and birthday parties I was doing pretty much stopped because everybody was really in a difficult situation. So I knew that the horse business was not going to support me and my 3 children, so I had to make a plan. So one day I was sitting in the kitchen. The house on the property is an 1830s house with a little tiny kitchen. And I was sitting there kind of feeling sorry for myself and going through an old cookbook. And in the cookbook, I was kind of reminiscing about my childhood. And as I'm looking through it, I'm smiling because I see all my grandmother's little notes on the sides of the recipes. And whenever we would visit her, I would always be in the kitchen with her, and really the only one that was interested in what she was doing. And she would study recipe books like someone might study a history book. And she always felt that she could make every recipe better. She never just accepted anything in life the way it was. And I ended up just like her. So it dawned on me that one of the things that was always important to me throughout my whole career, which was in the pharmaceutical industry, was that I always loved to bake. Like, I baked all the time. I baked for anybody that would accept anything I would make, but I never ever thought about making it a business. So I thought, well, should I just like try to get a job back in the pharmaceutical industry? And I even went on a couple job interviews, and I'm like, no, I am so done with corporate America. That's why I came to Warwick, bought a horse farm, and ran away from the world. What will really make me happy is making pies. So once I had this thought, I thought, well, let me get the kids together and let me tell them what I want to do and see what they think. Well, they thought this was probably one of the most exciting things that could happen, and we decided we better make a plan. So our little simple plan was, let's make up some flyers. I picked like 3 flavors of pies. We went out in the car and we put them in 50 mailboxes. And I know that we weren't supposed to be doing that, but because I had no money, I could not put an ad in the Warwick Advertiser. I just thought, I'm going to do this as long as I can without getting caught. And I did it for a little while, and by the first day we went out, by the time we got done with our drive and putting the flyers out, there were orders on the answering machine when I got home. So now jumping ahead a little bit, we went from selling pies to people's homes till we started selling pies at a picnic table on the side of the road on Route 94, if anybody remembers it. And the kids made signs. One of their favorite signs was the turn back for pie. And people used to come running up to us and say, I did it, I turned back for pie. So that's stuck with us all these years. So in 2009, I got really lucky and met my now husband, Tom Herman, and he jumped right in. He told me originally, though, that he couldn't make pie, that he did not bake. And I put up with that for a few weeks. I let him sit at the kitchen table and cut fruit, and then things got real. And we all had to make pie together, so we all had our jobs. I used to drop the kids off at Ox Orchard so that they could go pick fruit for me so we could make the pies. And on Thursday and Friday nights, we would make pies all night and sell them at the side of the road on the weekends. And we would all take turns sitting out there. Even my parents got in on it when they came to visit, and they sat out on Route 94. We got really, really lucky from support from people in the community. We had business owners who were very gracious and invited us into their establishments to help promote our business. Some restaurants that took a chance on us and put our pies on their menu. It required us to rent a kitchen that was licensed so that we could be legal, and we did that. And then the most amazing miracle of all happened was our current landlord at Meadowcrest, Steve Sullivan. He knew what we were doing. He'd seen Tom one day sitting outside in the freezing cold on our farm trying to get people to stop and buy pies. And he encouraged us to take a retail space in his building. I mean, he almost wouldn't take no. And we knew we didn't have the money for rent. And he's like, you need to be warm, you need to be dry, and don't worry about the rent, we'll work something out. So there we sat, and the people came. And as we grew our business, he adjusted the rent to kind of not make our lives miserable, but allow us to continue to grow. And he told me that he saw something in our eyes that you see maybe once in a lifetime, but he gave us a chance, and he believed in us. So we have our Warwick store. We're about to have our 15-year anniversary in July. Since then, we opened a second location in Westchester, in Rye. That's been about a year and a half. We're about to open a third in Tarrytown. QVC came to us. They begged us for years to come on QVC, and we kept saying no. I told them that they were crazy. And eventually, after getting worn down, we got invited to go on in last year in 2022. And my son, who joined our business full time a couple years ago, he went on for Christmas in July and sold 20,000 pies. So it's been, and you can't even imagine what it was like trying to get all of that done. So it was a big learning curve. So every time we've gone through one of these big growing spurts, you know, we have to like refigure out what we're doing, you know, what kind of equipment we need to help us get it done, how to package up the pies. And it's really been an incredible journey and an incredible learning experience. But and also Fresh Direct. I don't know if any of you know them. It's an online grocery store. Well, they approached us about 6 months ago, and now our pies get distributed throughout the whole tri-state area. So, but I was asked, you know, what did you learn about yourself during this experience? Well, I realized that I am more stubborn than I ever believed I was. I also learned that I'm pretty darn resilient because there were some really rough times. And it's still rough, but you know, I keep going at it. And in terms of, you know, what's been the best part about doing what I'm doing, number one, and I say this all the time because I will never take it for granted, are the people in this community. I mean, Warwick has completely enriched my life. And the relationships and the friendships and the community support for what we're doing is unbelievable. And over the years, people have always come in the bakery and asked me, how can I start a business like yours? Like, I really want to do what you're doing. And I always tell them, you can't do it in just any town. So to all of you, to all of Warwick, I'll never forget you, and our whole family thanks you.
Okay. So I was can you hear me? Yes. I was a 60s artist. I tried to make it in Greenwich Village. I didn't know what I was doing, but I painted, I made mobiles. I went to Nantucket and sold mobiles on the beach. I was a textile designer for a number of years, but I still couldn't find something that grabbed me. And in 1970, my husband and I took our honeymoon in Africa because, as you know, he's an African historian, and we went to Victoria Falls. And every place I went, I saw these beautiful fabrics and art, and we bought fabrics and art and ate all the food and had a wonderful time. And when we got back, we bought a house in Sugarloaf. And about 2 years later, I took a course at a place called Senekia, and it was an artistic collaborative of people, and they gave lessons, and Morag Benepi, who was a well-known batik artist at the time, was giving a course. 7 of us took the course, and we all absolutely fell in love with batik. I've realized that this is what I've been waiting for all those years. It just excited me so with the fabric and the dyes and the janting needles and the hot wax, and it was just a wonderful experience. So we took the course, and then a partner and I started in our backyard, and we did batik for about a year, and then got big enough to rent a place in the middle of Sugarloaf and called ourselves Bombika Batiks. And we sold all over. We did craft fairs up in Rhinebeck and in New York City, and I did silk scarves and sold to Henri Bendel and Altman's, and it was just a great experience, and I wanted to do it forever. I worked from early morn till more than setting sun. And then but I also wanted to have a family. So the next thing that happened was my sister-in-law, Dick's sister, and I were catering his parents' 50th wedding anniversary, making tea sandwiches, having a wonderful time doing that. And at the end, it was very successful. At the end, my sister-in-law said, I need a job. I've got to do something. My children are in school, and I just don't want to stay home any longer. So I said, well, I'm always looking for a little part-time job. Why don't we start a catering business? So now Susie was a spaghetti and meatball mama, and I was an exotic African food person, but in between, neither one of us knew anything about other foods. So the next day after this affair, we called Dick Hull and said, Dick, we'd like to borrow $200 to start a business, a catering business. And Dick said, well, what's your business plan? Susie and I looked at each other and said, business plan? What? We just were fooling around. But we took the $200 and we wrote up a little sign and a little postcard, I should say, and sent it out to all of our nearest and dearest friends in New York City, all the people we didn't even know, but we sent it out, over 100 postcards, and if the phone didn't start ringing, we were shocked when it did. And we were starting to do a gallery opening in New York with hors d'oeuvres. I was looking through the Joy of Cooking book to find out a new hors d'oeuvre that I was going to try. And Susie she made her meatballs, but she tried to make them in a fancy manner. And people loved us. So that's what we did for a little while. And then I was also doing batik. I finally got pregnant and went to the hospital, and the doctor said, well, what's your profession? I said, well, I'm a batik artist. Well, what does that mean? I told him all about the dyes that I was using, the Procyon dyes, and he said, stop. You cannot do that any longer. You are no longer allowed to do any batiking. And so I stopped right away. I put all my things away, thinking when the kids got a little older, I'd go back to it. And I went into the catering business. Susie left me in 1982. I had 2 kids by then. And I went into it full-time, hired chef and a couple of full-time kitchen people, and turned our garage into a catering kitchen and started doing parties all over, out in Boston, up in Vermont, and had a wonderful time doing that. And never got back to doing batik because you needed at least 6 or 8 hours every time you did it. And with 2 boys, that was not possible. So that's my story. I am so grateful that both of my children are artists, so I'm living through them. Thank you.
I'm just so sorry we're down to the end, but there may be somebody in the audience who might want to share a story. Anybody inspired to share a story? You? I know, right? Yeah, come on up. I'm excited. I know everybody's tired. Are we tired? Do we want to hear another story?
Wonderful. Thank you. Preface. People often ask me where my accent is from, and I just call it the New Yorican Bronx accent. 35 years ago, my then husband and I were looking for a home to raise our family. We looked for a long time. We were looking for a place with diversity, and I really needed to feel safe. I grew up in the Bronx during the 70s, lots of crime. The Bronx was burning. So anyway, we made it to Warwick. There was not that much diversity, but there was just something about Warwick. So we moved. My then husband, toddler, and baby on the way. We rented a condo, and within the first week, someone's knocking on the door, really hard. I wasn't gonna open the door, but I asked, who is it? And they said they were a police officer. Okay, could you show me your badge? Could you come around to the window, show me your badge? And so they did. I opened the door. They asked for my husband's name. I said, well, he's not home from work yet. So I said, okay, call us when he gets here. So I'm wondering, what the heck is this about? Is he a criminal I didn't know about? Anyway, I just had to find out more. He used to work late, it was late. And so I called the precinct to get more information. And can you tell me more about what this is about? And they told me there's a death in the family, a death notice, something like that, they said. Oh, could it be in my family? I started calling my sister, everybody, nobody's dead. Finally, he gets home. I said, you have to call the police, they're looking for you. So he does, and they come, and they pull him aside. They wouldn't even talk to him in front of me. And I'm watching him take out his ID and everything, and he's showing them. And finally, they leave. And what happened was that when we put the change of address to when we moved, there was someone with his full name on an FBI wanted list. But it wasn't him. I guess he proved that. So the next day, I take the girls out for a walk, and a neighbor comes up to me and says, do you know why the cops were surrounding the house last night with their guns in their hand? I said, oh, I guess I'm safe. I hope they feel safe with me. But it's been 35 years. I've been very safe in Warwick, and I love Warwick.